Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper, and we begin today with the politics lead. Two major stories are grabbing the attention of lawmakers today, and both represent continued fallout from the Donald Trump presidency, the coronavirus pandemic, and the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Today, Trump's leadership failures and the lasting damage they have wrought upon the nation were on full display. The very same Trump team that 1 year ago today made this ill-fated claim.
This president will always put America first. He will always protect American citizens. We will not see diseases like the coronavirus come here. We will not see terrorism come here. And isn't that refreshing?
Isn't that refreshing? Yet here we are today with more than 507,000 Americans dead from the coronavirus. 5 others killed during a domestic terror attack on the U.S. Capitol incited by then President Trump himself. It is sad to think what might have been, what could have been. For instance, also 1 year ago today, on the same day Kayleigh McEnany was asserting that the U.S. need not worry about the coronavirus coming here, an actual expert from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Dr. Nancy Messonnier, gave this warning to the American people.
Ultimately, we expect we will see community spread in this country. It's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more a question of exactly when this will happen and how many people in this country will have severe illness.
Messonnier was soon essentially silenced because of those remarks, though she was, of course, correct in her prediction, just as the violence at the Capitol was predictable and predicted. For months, we heard President Trump and his enablers spread the big lie that this election had been stolen. Today, 2 top law enforcement officials face some tough questions from members of Congress about how they could possibly have been caught off guard on January 6th. As CNN's Ryan Noble reports, lawmakers were frustrated by the lack of clear answers.
The blame game in full effect on Capitol Hill again.
What I'm hearing is the same old stuff and pointing fingers, and it looks like protecting jobs.
Acting Capitol Police Chief Yogananda Pittman and Acting House Sergeant-at-Arms Timothy Blodgett told lawmakers the agencies were unprepared for the massive amount of people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
I think that we were well in excess of 10,000 that traversed the grounds. But as far as the numbers that actually came into the building, we estimate that that was approximately 800 demonstrators.
The pair were critical of information that came in ahead of time, claiming some of it never made it to them, parts of it were wrong, and some of it even contradictory.
The department was not ignorant of intelligence indicating an attack of the size and scale we encountered on the 6th. There was no such intelligence.
Still, the Capitol Police made changes to their plans based on the intelligence they did get.
We increased the size of protection details, deployed counter-surveillance agents across D.C., increased our CDU platoons, including deploying hard platoons. We deployed SWAT teams, enlarged the security perimeter, and increased exterior and interior patrols to include the subways.
But lawmakers pushed Pittman and Blodgett to acknowledge that regardless of the excuses, the security plan did not work.
Okay, so that you will have one line of communication coming from the top down to all the officers on the ground? Is that what the purpose of it is?
It doesn't align one communication down from the top. It's a structured system. It's tiered. The person with boots on the ground has certain responsibilities, and then it defines each of those persons in the incident command structure, what their role and responsibility is.
So is it safe to say that that structure failed on January 6th?
Yes.
The lack of communication and the faulty intelligence continues to be a theme of these hearings. Security officials are in agreement that it is the root of what went wrong.
On January 6th, our incident command protocols were not adhered to as they should have.
And there were a number of questions today about what happens next, and in particular, this intense security posture that remains on Capitol Hill. And Chief Pittman said that they're still worried about what could come in the future, particularly a joint session address by President Biden to members of Congress. Now, that hasn't been planned yet, but Pittman claimed there is concern that there are individuals that want to, quote, blow up the Capitol and kill as many members as possible. She didn't elaborate much on that claim, but Jake, that security perimeter, that big wall that still wraps around the campus of the Capitol, Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler revealing today it is costing taxpayers $2 million a week. Jake.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's discuss with our panel. Phil Mudd, let me start with you. This week, we have consistently heard law enforcement officials blaming a lack of intelligence on what happened on January 6th. First of all, obviously, the people responsible for January 6th are the actual terrorists and the people who incited them, clearly. But there was a failure here. I have to say, Phil, anyone paying attention was worried that things might get violent that day. What do you make of this, blaming this on a failure of intelligence?
Well, thanks for being polite, because I'm not. What a complete whitewash. Here's the intelligence that you could have gotten off of CNN for free if you pay your cable bill. And by the way, some of these people have acknowledged this when they're providing testimony. Thousands of people are showing up. You know what date, you know what time, you know that they're showing up near the Capitol. In other words, they're proximate to where the violence took place. You know that some of them are armed, you know they're angry, and you know the president's going to stir them up. Do they want the social security numbers of everybody who should? The question here that might go to, did we have precision on exactly how many hundreds of people would storm the Capitol? No, because we never anticipated that the commander-in-chief would encourage them to do that. He's at fault. But what kind of intelligence do you want, Jake? The question that they need to answer is, if the intelligence was iffy, because we did complete clarity on people who were engaging in political protests, one question. What?
Phil, you're breaking up a little. Phil, Phil, go ahead. What's the one question? Because you're breaking up a little. Okay.
I was saying,
let's just go to Abby for 1 second.
They should have asked, what if this goes south?
Okay, something's wrong with your connection there. Let me figure that out while we go to Abby. Abby, we saw a lot of frustration from lawmakers today. I want you to take a listen to Republican Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler.
Part of the problem there was chaos was because each and every one of these officers, boots on the ground, commander or not, had to make a decision with no information. Like, there was no incoming help as far as they knew. They had no idea what you guys were doing. I mean, my hat is off to these brave men and women. They saved our lives. And I'm frustrated that I'm not hearing, this is how we're fixing that right now. This is what we're doing. And that's what I expect.
There were not a lot of answers today from these two officials, the acting chief of Capitol Police and the acting House Sergeant at Arms. But it is shocking what Congresswoman Herrera Butler is saying in terms of the lack of basic communication with members of Congress that they were charged with protecting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lack of communication is all the way through the entire incident. You had individual officers making decisions, life or death decisions, about where they would go and what they would be doing, how they would protect individual members. That's one of the reasons you saw during the impeachment hearings that extraordinary footage of one of the officers stopping Mitt Romney as he was heading toward the mob that might have killed him. So, look, this was, I think the officials acknowledged today that the failure was all around. But I think one thing that still hasn't really been answered is, why is there still silence? Why hasn't there been a real, comprehensive debriefing to the public, let alone to members of Congress, about what problems they've identified and how they are going to be resolved? I think that is still an outstanding issue. You have car crashes where police officers come out and they give a briefing almost immediately after. There has been virtual silence from Capitol Police and its leadership. And I think that's one of the reasons you saw so much frustration on both sides of the aisle today from lawmakers who are trying to pull it out of them like pulling teeth, when this should have been information provided months ago, frankly.
And let me just also note that we use clips from Congresswoman Herrera Butler, who's a Republican from Washington, who voted to certify the election, voted to impeach Donald Trump. We used a clip from Congresswoman Kay Granger, who was fairly early in terms of Republican members of Congress, saying Donald Trump lost the election. It's time for us to acknowledge that. But there are people who were complicit in this attack in some ways, who are there listening to these hearings and asking questions.
Yep.
I mean, people who fed the big lie that created this BS narrative that if they went there on the Capitol, they could actually overturn the election, which was never going to happen. They're walking among them. It's 2/3 of the House Republican Conference.
And they are, in some cases, with indignation, questioning the Capitol Hill officials about what occurred on January 6th when they themselves were a part of the reason that it happened in the first place. And then, you saw Senator Ron Johnson yesterday at the hearing spewing conspiracy theories from that committee room. Look, it's a real problem. It's going to be difficult for Congress to get to the bottom of this when there are so many members who won't even acknowledge why it happened in the first place, who won't acknowledge their roles in what happened on that day. And so, some of these hearings have become kind of farcical because they're about sort of scoring political points, about, lying about whether there were infiltrators in the group who were pretending to be Trump supporters. That is obviously not helpful to getting to the bottom of what actually happened there and what could happen again. That was the big warning from the hearing today, which is that this is not over. There are people who were involved in the insurrection on January 6th who are actively plotting future attacks, and members of Congress seem to be more concerned about covering their own political, their own political selves after what happened on January 6th.
There should be a hearing on Capitol Hill about the responsibility of members of Congress for what happened on that day. Of course, I'm sure we'll never see such a hearing, but it would be interesting to happen. Abby, thank you so much. Phil Mudd, sorry your computer conked out. Let's move on. It must be lonely for Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger as the Illinoisan speaks up and speaks out. He's going to join us live next to discuss the future of the Republican Party. And then we're going to visit a public high school that has had in-person learning since the fall, and they are not following all of the CDC guidelines. Coming up, let's take a look at how that's going. Stay with us.
Hiring new employees takes a lot of patience. Just finding the right candidates is time-consuming, and quickly filling open positions is an important factor in keeping your business moving. Indeed is the only job site that can move as fast as you do. Indeed.com is the hiring site that helps you find quality candidates with Indeed Instant Match. Indeed searches through the millions of resumes in their database to help show you great candidates instantly. Unlike some hiring sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility, delivering a quality shortlist faster. With Indeed, there are no long-term contracts. You can pause your account at any time, and you only pay for what you need. And Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. Want your quality shortlist fast? You need Indeed. Right now, get a free $75 credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Tapper. That's Indeed.com/Tapper. Offer valid through March 31st. Terms and conditions apply.
And we're back with our politics lead. The growing divide in the Republican Party spilling into the public today. Members of the House Freedom Caucus once again called for Congresswoman Liz Cheney, the number 3 Republican in the House, to lose her leadership role for daring to say that former President Trump should not speak at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, or, more importantly, have a role in the Republican Party moving forward after the January 6th insurrection. Joining me now is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. Congressman, good to see you. I want to play some sound from 2 of your fellow Republicans, Chip Roy and Andy Biggs, and listen to what they had to say about Liz Cheney today.
You cannot stand up and make a statement that is so completely out of step with the Republican conference and where the American people who support President Trump are.
I also think she's absolutely devoid of any kind of political reading of what's going on in the Republican Party in this country.
Now, to their point, it's accurate that you and Liz Cheney represent a minority of Republicans, both in Congress and, according to polling nationally, in terms of your views of President Trump and how he should no longer be the leader of the Republican Party. So what do you think of what Roy and Biggs had to say?
Yeah, Chip confuses me because he was, standing up making the case for certifying the election, low bar. But, I don't understand this cancel culture move. Look, they say you're not good at reading the political tea leaves. Well, that's what leadership is about, is leading political opinion. And Liz I would say anybody, even if you disagree with her, you can say it. She's a tough leader, and she's saying what there are a lot of people that want to hear, and beyond what they want to hear, they need to hear. You know, you can continue to pledge that loyalty to Donald Trump, and many will, and I understand it, but we're also presenting a competing vision for an optimistic future and a party that is not, working through subtraction and addition, and instead going to do it through addition. So I like this whole